Captain, with all due respect, this simulator is for combat pilots, not for ticking a diversity box on a command roster. The words, spoken by Major Cade, sliced through the low hum of the briefing room with the precision of a laser-guided munition. They were designed to detonate on impact, to publicly humiliate, to establish dominance through sheer, unadulterated arrogance. The crowd, a collection of seasoned aviators with call signs like Viper and Razor, reacted as intended. A few snickered, a wave of uncomfortable chuckles rippling through the assembled flight suits. Most simply stared at their boots or the floor, their silence a form of quiet complicity, isolating the target in a bubble of condescension. The target, Captain Eva Rostova, offered no reaction. Her face, framed by dark hair pulled back into a severe regulation bun, remained a mask of placid neutrality. She did not flinch. She did not blush. She did not even meet the Major's gaze. Instead, her attention was fixed on the datapad in her hands, her thumb methodically scrolling through the pre-flight checklist for the XR-9 Scythe, the Air Force's newest, most volatile, and most classified atmospheric superiority fighter. Her flight suit, unlike the custom-tailored gear of the other pilots, seemed a size too large, bunching slightly at her shoulders and masking the lean, wiry strength beneath. She looked less like a warrior and more like a librarian who had wandered into the wrong building. This unassuming appearance was the fuel for Cade's fire. But in the back of the room, leaning against the far wall and half hidden in the shadows, a three-star general watched the exchange. He saw something the others missed. It wasn't in her posture, which was relaxed but poised. It was in her hands, the way they held the datapad, steady and sure. The way her fingers moved with an economy of motion that spoke not of inexperience, but of thousands of hours of practiced, ingrained procedure. It was a subtle detail, a flicker of profound competence that was utterly at odds with the Major's dismissive caricature. The general saw the stance of a professional waiting for the noise to die down so she could get to work. If you believe that true strength is measured in action, not volume, type competence below. Major Cade continued his verbal assault, his voice booming with the self-satisfied authority of a man who has never been seriously challenged. He paced before the small group of pilots slated to test the new simulation, using a pointer to gesture vaguely at the schematic of the XR-9 on the main screen. This machine, gentlemen and captain, is not a toy. It's a beast. It has a kill ratio of 20-1 in our projections and a pilot error tolerance of 0. It will chew you up and spit you out if you so much as think about the wrong rudder input. We've had a dozen of our best guys, pilots with thousands of hours in F-22s and F-35s, wash out of this very simulation. They couldn't even handle the basic takeoff sequence without triggering a cascade failure. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room, then turned his gaze directly on Rostova again. Your file says you have administrative flight hours, ferrying VIPs in a Gulfstream, I presume? That's all well and good, Captain, but this isn't a luxury jet. There's no autopilot to save you. There's no co-pilot to blame. It's just you, God, and a flight computer that actively hates you. The injustice was a palpable thing, thick and suffocating in the air-conditioned chill of the advanced weapons facility. Rostova's file was thin, almost suspiciously so. It listed her rank, her time in service, and a series of assignments that were vaguely described as logistical support and aeronautical systems analysis. There were no combat deployments listed, no squadron affiliations, no record of a single sortie in a fighter jet. To an arrogant gatekeeper like Major Cade, the file screamed inexperience. It was a blank slate onto which he could project all of his prejudices about a female officer who, in his mind, had been promoted based on quotas rather than merit. He saw her silence not as discipline, but as fear. He saw her calm not as professionalism, but as the clueless placidity of someone who didn't understand the danger she was in. He mistook stillness for weakness. And so he pressed his advantage, convinced he was performing a public service by exposing an unqualified pilot before she got herself, or others, notionally killed. So, here's the deal, Cade announced, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. You can step aside, Captain. No shame in it. We can find you a nice, safe C-130 simulation down the hall. You can practice cargo drops. Or you can get in that chair and show us all what a real pilot looks like. Your call. He had backed her into a corner, in front of her peers, in front of the silent general in the back. A refusal would be an admission of inadequacy. An acceptance would, in his mind, lead to a spectacular and embarrassing failure. For him, it was a win-win. Captain Rostova finally looked up from her datapad. Her eyes, a cool, steady gray, met his for the first time. There was no anger in them, no fear, no emotion at all. It was the dispassionate gaze of an engineer evaluating a faulty piece of equipment. She offered only 2 words, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tension. Understood, Major. Then she turned and walked toward the monolithic black orb of the simulator, her movements fluid and deliberate, leaving a wake of stunned silence and a lingering echo of Major Cade's profound, catastrophic misjudgment. The door to the XR-9 simulator hissed shut, sealing Captain Rostova inside a world of pure data. In the control room, a dozen monitors flickered to life, displaying every conceivable metric from the simulated flight. Altitude, airspeed, G-forces, engine temperature, weapon status, and a live feed of Rostova's face, captured by a small interior camera. Her expression was unchanged, calm, focused. Her hands moved across the holographic controls with a liquid grace, her fingers dancing over panels and switches that had left other, more experienced combat pilots fumbling and confused. She didn't seem to be learning the system. She seemed to be communing with it, as if greeting an old friend. Major Cade stood with his arms crossed, a smug look on his face, ready for the inevitable failure. "All right, Captain," he barked into the comms, initiating the Cobra's Nest protocol. "Let's see what you've got." He was starting her on the most difficult scenario, a brutal, unwinnable meat grinder designed to stress test the simulation's failure algorithms. No one had lasted more than 90 seconds. The simulation began not with a gentle takeoff, but in media res at 40,000 feet in the heart of a raging thunderstorm. Alarms blared instantly. The main screen flashed with a cascade of critical failures. "Engine 1 is on fire," the calm, computerized voice announced. "Engine 2 is offline. Main hydraulics failing. Multiple SAM launches detected. Eject! Eject! Eject!" On the monitor showing Rostova's face, there was no panic. Her eyes scanned her instruments. Her breathing remained slow and even. She ignored the ejection warning. Her left hand flew across a console, rerouting auxiliary power to the fire suppression system and stabilizing the hydraulic pressure just enough to maintain minimal control. Her right hand eased the control stick, not fighting the crippled aircraft but guiding it, finessing it into a controlled, gliding descent. The other pilots in the room leaned forward, their mockery forgotten, replaced by a dawning sense of disbelief. "She stabilized," one of them whispered. "How did she?" "The system shouldn't even allow that." Cade's smirk faltered. "It's a fluke. The SAMs will get her." On the tactical display, 6 red triangles screamed toward the lone blue icon representing the XR-9. Without engine power, her speed was bleeding off rapidly, making her an easy target. But Rostova wasn't trying to outrun them. She was waiting. Her eyes were locked on the closing velocity indicators. At the last possible second, a moment so precise it seemed to defy human reaction time, her thumb jabbed a button. A cloud of shimmering chaff and flares erupted from the crippled jet. Simultaneously, she dipped the nose of the aircraft, using the last of her hydraulic pressure to throw the scythe into a gut-wrenching sideslip, a maneuver that should have torn the wings off. The missiles, confused by the sudden change in trajectory and the electronic countermeasures, shot past, detonating harmlessly in the empty sky. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the hum of the computers and the distant, simulated roar of the wind over Rostova's canopy. She had survived the unsurvivable, but the test wasn't over. She was now in a powerless glider, a multi-billion-dollar brick falling out of a storm, with a runway still 10 miles away. It was a dead stick landing, the ultimate test of a pilot's skill, something practiced for but rarely, if ever, executed in a real fighter, let alone a crippled next-generation prototype in zero visibility. "She's going for the runway," Cade muttered, his voice now laced with a note of incredulous awe. "She's insane. Rostova's hands were a blur of constant, minute adjustments. She was playing the wind, using the storm itself to manage her energy, trading altitude for airspeed with the precision of a surgeon. The simulated runway lights appeared through the driving rain, impossibly far. The computerized voice returned, its tone flat and emotionless. Warning, airspeed critical. Stall imminent. The pilots held their breath. This was it, the moment of failure. But Captain Rostova did something no one expected. Instead of trying to stretch the glide, she pushed the nose down slightly, gaining a burst of speed. She was aiming not for the start of the runway, but for the middle. As the landing gear deployed with a sickening, underpowered clunk, the aircraft skimmed over the tarmac, tires kissing the wet asphalt with the gentleness of a whisper. The XR-9 rolled down the runway, carried by its own momentum, and came to a perfect stop precisely on the center line. On the main monitor in the control room, a block of green text appeared, stark and undeniable against the black background. Mission successful. Aircraft secure. A collective gasp went through the room, a sharp, shared intake of breath. The deafening silence that followed was heavier and more profound than any explosion. Every pilot, every technician, every single person in that room was staring at the screen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. They had not just seen a pilot pass a test. They had seen an artist paint a masterpiece. They had witnessed someone bend the laws of physics and aerodynamics to their will, transforming an unwinnable scenario into a flawless demonstration of airmanship. Major Cade stood frozen, his arms slack at his sides. The arrogance had evaporated from his face, replaced by a pale mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish out of water. Finally, he managed to stammer a single, broken phrase, a question directed at the universe itself. That's not possible. The algorithm. It was designed to be unbeatable. His words hung in the air, a testament to his shattered worldview. He had built his confidence on a foundation of established limits and known variables, and a quiet, unassuming captain had just demolished that foundation with an act of impossible competence. The hiss of the simulator door opening broke the spell. Captain Rostova stepped out, her face showing no signs of the extreme G-forces or the immense pressure she had just been under. She looked exactly as she had when she went in, calm, composed, professional. She held a small data chip in her hand. She walked directly to Major Cade, her footsteps the only sound in the cavernous room. She didn't gloat. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply held out the chip. "The flight control software has a recursive error in the hydraulic feedback loop," she said, her voice even and technical. "It creates a synthetic oscillation under compound failure states. My flight data on the chip isolates the lines of code. You'll want your engineers to look at it." She had not only beaten the simulation, she had diagnosed and fixed it. Cade could only stare at the chip, then at her, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and dawning horror. It was at that moment that the three-star general, who had remained a silent observer in the shadows, decided it was time to step into the light. The heavy, measured footsteps of General Madsen echoed on the polished concrete floor as he walked from the back of the room toward the central control console. The other pilots instinctively straightened up, their shock momentarily eclipsed by the presence of high command. Major Cade snapped his head around, his face paling further as he realized the entire humiliating spectacle had been witnessed by the theater's top commander. General Madsen ignored Cade completely. His eyes, weathered by decades of service and command, were fixed on Captain Rostova with an expression of profound respect. He walked past her and stopped at the main terminal, his hands moving over the keyboard with a quiet authority. He didn't need to ask for her name or service number. He already knew. He typed a single word into the system's personnel search field. Rostova. He hit enter. The command line blinked for a moment before her service record flashed onto the main screen, projected 10 feet high for everyone to see. The thin, unimpressive file Cade had mocked was gone. In its place was a document so heavily redacted it was mostly black lines, but the information that remained was staggering. The narrator's voice could have described the cascade of revelations that illuminated the room, each line item a hammer blow to the foundation of their assumptions. Unit 412th Test Wing, Skunk Works Division. Project Aurora. The name hung in the air, a whisper of myth and legend. Project Aurora wasn't just a classified program. It was a ghost, a theoretical hypersonic reconnaissance platform that most pilots believed was nothing more than a rumor, a black-budget fantasy. Flight designation, ASDRA-7. A singular call sign, not a squadron number. The designation of a lead, a primary, the one who flies it first. Combat hours, classified, a word far more intimidating than any number. It meant her missions were not recorded in standard logs. They were events that officially never happened, flown in places that didn't exist on any map. Test flights, XR, 9-side program, 412. The number was a thunderclap. She had more hours in the prototype than all the other pilots in the room combined. She hadn't been learning the aircraft. She had been its teacher. Special qualifications, hypersonic vehicle command, advanced systems integration, emergency protocol design. The last 3 words were the final, devastating reveal. She hadn't just mastered the emergency protocols. She had written them. She had designed the very test that Cade had used to try and humiliate her. The room was now so quiet that the sound of the building's ventilation system seemed like a roar. The pilots exchanged looks of awe and shame. They had been in the presence of aviation royalty and had been completely, utterly blind to it. General Madsen turned away from the screen to face Rostova, who had been standing silently through the entire reveal. He didn't speak. He simply stood before her, drew himself up to his full height, and executed the sharpest, most formal salute of his long and decorated career. It was not the salute of a superior to a subordinate. It was the salute of a warrior to a master of their craft, a gesture that transcended rank and protocol. Captain Rostova, he said, his voice deep and resonant with authority. My apologies for the reception you received here today. It is an honor to have you, ma'am. The word ma'am, spoken from a 3-star general to a captain, was the final, undeniable validation. It was a public conferral of respect so profound it was like a physical force, reshaping the power dynamics of the entire room. Cade looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared at the general, saluting the captain he had just belittled, his mind finally grasping the full, terrifying scope of his error. He hadn't just insulted a fellow officer. He had insulted a living legend, the very architect of the machine he was charged with guarding. The general lowered his salute and then turned his gaze upon Major Cade. The warmth and respect he had shown Rostova vanished, replaced by an Arctic chill that seemed to drop the temperature of the room by 20 degrees. His voice was no longer loud, but it carried an edge of cold fury that was far more terrifying than any shout. Major, he began, his words slow and deliberate, each one a perfectly aimed projectile. You have a command philosophy problem. You operate from a position of assumption, not observation. You value volume over substance. You look at a flight suit and you see gender. You look at a rank and you see a ceiling. You look at a quiet professional and you see a target for your own insecurities. He took a step closer to the now trembling major. Let me be unequivocally clear, for your benefit and for the benefit of every pilot in this room. You are not looking at Captain Rostova. You are looking at Astra 7. The woman who holds the altitude and speed records for every classified air-breathing vehicle we have. The woman who flew the first prototype of the XR-9 when it was nothing more than an engine, a cockpit, and a prayer. The unwinnable scenario you just subjected her to? That is a simulation of her 3rd test flight, a flight where she experienced a triple system failure over the Barents Sea and still managed to bring the only existing prototype home. She wasn't passing your test, Major. She was grading it. The general let the words hang in the air, a final, damning indictment. He then turned to the other pilots, his gaze sweeping over them. Respect is not a function of the rank on someone's collar. It is a function of the competence in their character. You would all do well to remember that. He then looked back to Rostova, his expression softening once more. Captain, your analysis of the feedback loop is invaluable. My office will see to it that your recommendations are implemented immediately. Thank you for your time. With a final, respectful nod, he turned and walked out of the control room, leaving behind a legacy of shattered arrogance and the birth of a new, powerful legend. Captain Rostova simply nodded back, her expression as calm and unreadable as ever. Her victory needed no celebration. Her competence was its own statement. The story of what happened in Simulator Bay force spread through the base like a shockwave. It wasn't transmitted through official channels or after-action reports. It moved through the informal, lightning-fast network of military gossip, carried by stunned pilots, wide-eyed technicians, and chastened NCOs. It was told in hushed tones in the mess hall, debated over beers at the officers' club, and recounted with a growing sense of mythic reverence in the hangars and maintenance bays. They called it the Rostova Landing, or, more poetically, the Ghost Rebuke. Every telling added a new layer of detail, a new embellishment, until the event took on the quality of folklore. The impossible dead-stick landing in the simulated storm became a symbol, a cautionary tale for any officer who dared to let their ego write a check their skills couldn't cash. The legend was cemented a week later when a framed printout appeared on the main wall of the simulator facility's briefing room. It was a simple, stark image. The final telemetry reading from Rostova's flight, showing the XR-9 perfectly centered on the runway, with the words "Mission Successful" in bold green text. Beneath it, a small brass plaque was affixed. It didn't mention her name or rank. It just read, the impact on Major Cade was profound and transformative. He was not discharged or demoted. General Madsen knew that such a public shaming was a far more effective corrective tool. Cade became a ghost in his own command, haunted by the memory of his catastrophic misjudgment. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost fearful humility. 2 weeks after the incident, he approached Captain Rostova as she was preparing to leave the base. He found her not in an office, but on the flight line, speaking quietly with a young female airman, a crew chief, about the torque specifications on an F-22's landing gear. Cade waited at a respectful distance until she was finished. When she turned to him, he did not offer excuses. He did not try to minimize his actions. He stood at attention and looked her directly in the eye, his face a portrait of sincere contrition. "Captain," he said, his voice clear but stripped of all its former bluster. "I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, so I will not. But I am asking for your help. I was wrong. My assumptions were unprofessional and ignorant. I have failed my pilots by teaching them to value the wrong things. I am requesting, formally, that you lead a seminar for my squadron, not on flying, but on professionalism, on process, on how to remove ego from the cockpit." Captain Rostova studied him for a long moment, her gray eyes seeming to see right through him. She could have refused. She could have savored her victory and let him twist in the wind. But that was not her way. Her entire ethos was built on quiet competence and the relentless pursuit of mission success. And the mission now was to fix a broken culture. "I will prepare a presentation, Major," she said simply. "Be ready to take notes?" And she did. Her seminar was not a lecture. It was a clinical, dispassionate deconstruction of her impossible flight. She broke it down not as a single act of heroism, but as 1,000 small, correct decisions, a chain of disciplined choices forged through endless repetition and a fanatical devotion to procedure. She never once mentioned Cade's insults. She never once spoke of her own legendary status. Her focus was entirely on the data, on the process, on the professional standard. In doing so, she taught them more than they could ever learn from a manual. She taught them that excellence was a habit, that confidence was quiet, and that true authority was earned through undeniable skill, not demanded by rank. The legend of Astra 7 became institutional memory, a foundational story told to every new pilot who passed through the facility. The simulator itself was informally nicknamed the Rostova, and the specific wing-straining maneuver she had used to dodge the SAMs was officially added to the tactical playbook as the Rostova slip. The ripple effects of her quiet demonstration spread far beyond the base. Her technical report on the flight control software led to a fleet-wide patch, preventing a potential catastrophe in the real-world XR-9 fleet. Her seminar on professionalism was recorded and became required viewing at the Air Force Academy, a masterclass in the ethos of the quiet professional. The young female pilot who had been present in the briefing room, who had witnessed Cade's initial humiliation of Rostova and then her subsequent triumph, found in her a powerful new role model. She sought Rostova out, becoming her informal mentee. Under Rostova's guidance, she learned that her own quiet, methodical nature was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be honed. She learned to trust her training, to let her results speak for themselves, and to ignore the loud, insecure voices that would seek to diminish her. This passing of the torch, this quiet propagation of a culture of competence, was Rostova's true victory. It was not the silencing of a single arrogant major, but the inspiration of a new generation of pilots who understood the difference between noise and signal. Her influence was not in what she said, but in what she did, and in the enduring standard she set. The symbolic artifact of the event was not just the framed printout. It was the change in the air itself. A new seriousness, a new focus, a new understanding that the person next to you, no matter their rank, gender, or appearance, might just be the one who wrote the book. And it was a lesson that no one at that base would ever forget. They learned that the most dangerous weapon in the sky was not a missile or a stealth fighter, but a pilot with nothing left to prove. A year passed. The seasons changed over the high desert, but the change within the walls of the advanced weapons facility was more permanent. The culture had fundamentally shifted. The casual arrogance and swagger that had once permeated the briefing rooms had been replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. Competence had become the sole currency, the only metric that mattered. Major Cade was a different man. He spoke less and listened more. He was known for seeking out the opinions of his junior officers and NCOs, for fostering an environment where a good idea could come from anywhere. His experience with Captain Rostova had been a crucible, burning away his pride and forging him into a better, wiser leader. He never spoke of the incident, but he didn't have to. The framed telemetry printout on the wall, with its simple plaque reading the standard, spoke for him every single day. The young female pilot Rostova had mentored, now a captain herself, had become one of the top performers in the program. She flew with a calm confidence that was a mirror of her mentors, her every action a testament to the lessons she had learned about professionalism and discipline. One afternoon, a new pilot, fresh out of flight school and full of the unearned confidence of youth, was staring at the printout on the wall. "What's the big deal?" he asked the young captain, who was standing nearby. "So, some pilot had a good run in the sim." "Big deal." The captain turned to him, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. She didn't rebuke him. She didn't get angry. She simply began to tell him the story. She told him about the quiet captain in the ill-fitting flight suit, about the loud major full of arrogant assumptions, and about the impossible flight that had silenced a room full of aces. She described the cascade of failures, the volley of missiles, and the dead-stick landing in a thunderstorm that defied the very programming of the simulator. As she spoke, the young pilot's smirk slowly faded, replaced by a look of wide-eyed wonder and respect. The story had become a parable, a piece of institutional folklore passed from one generation to the next, a vital lesson in humility and the nature of true expertise. The legacy of Captain Eva Rostova of Astra 7 was not written in the pages of a history book or engraved on a monument. It was a living legacy, present in the changed behavior of an officer corps, in the confident hands of the next generation of pilots, and in the enduring silence that now fell over a briefing room whenever a new, unassuming face walked through the door. It was a legacy of quiet competence, a legacy built not on what you say, but on what you do, a legacy that proved that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It is simply revealed when it is needed most. Her silence that day was not an absence of a response. It was a response in its purest form. It was a testament to a confidence so deep, so absolute, that it required no external validation. It was the calm before the storm of her own making, a storm of skill and precision that washed away arrogance and left only respect in its wake. This is the enduring power of the quiet professional. In a world that constantly rewards the loudest voice, they are a reminder that the most profound impact is often made by those who have nothing to prove, for their actions have already proven everything. Their worth is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of fact demonstrated in a single, clean shot, a flawless flight, a life saved. It is the quiet clarity of moral purpose, the silent discipline of a master, the undeniable authority of demonstrated excellence. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in a file or on a plaque. It is what continues forward in the standards of those you inspire. It is the quiet understanding that the measure of a warrior is not the noise they make in the barracks, but the silence they command in the storm. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.